Recently, the FAA issued a massive proposed fine to a YouTuber. Did the FAA go ballistic? Let's talk about that. Hello and welcome to Legal Drone, where we talk about drones and other tech stuff. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Before we begin, as always, this is not legal advice. Recently, I saw a blog post of a FAA proposed fine to a YouTuber. That fine was for about $182,000, which is a massive amount of money for a fine to a single person. What happened here? I'm not gonna get into the details of the proposed fines and the whole story, but it basically, the FAA got complaints and they investigated. They went to his YouTube channel and they saw every one of his videos, and from that they determined that he violated like 120 something regulations, or at least he deviated from regulations more than 120 times. And for each deviation, the FAA issued a $1,500 proposed fine. And what I'm gonna do in this video is I'm gonna divide it into 4 topics, and in those topics I'm gonna discuss different aspects of investigations. First, I'm gonna talk about YouTube videos as evidence during investigations. Second, I'm gonna talk about the difference between criminal investigations and FAA investigations that are of administrative nature. Third, I'm gonna talk about remote ID and how all this falls into place with remote ID. And finally, YouTube recently updated its terms and conditions, and the leap that it did with the monetization program was a big one, and I'm gonna talk about all that in this video. Let's start with YouTube footage as evidence during an investigation. The first thing that you need to understand is that for the FAA, YouTube videos are not conclusive of someone deviating from the regulations. What does that mean is that an FAA investigator might see a video and he will say, well, there is a possible violation there or a possible deviation from regulations, but it's not conclusive, at least if there is not enough information in the video. But what we saw with these YouTubers videos is that he did live streams and he live streamed his screen, and on that screen you see altitude, distance, and all the warnings that the DJI app gives you. You will see warnings like airspace warnings, strong wind warnings. All those warnings are there in your screen, and by live streaming that, you just recorded practically everything you did with your drone. So that made easier for the FAA the investigation. Now, the thing is that the FAA isn't sitting on a computer watching YouTube videos all day of people making footage with their drones. What happens is that they receive a complaint and they investigate the complaint, and from that investigation, most likely procedure for an FAA investigator is to go to your YouTube page, and he's gonna watch every single one of your videos. Therefore, if he got one complaint but from the investigation arises that there are multiple videos of you deviating from the rules, you're gonna get probably notifications for all those videos. And like I said, YouTube videos or social media videos should not be conclusive of a violation or deviation from the regulations. Because let's say you have footage of a lake and it is an edited footage, it is really difficult for an FAA investigator to put you on the remote and flying the drone deviating from the rules at that particular moment. Therefore, you have to be very careful with what you upload. You shouldn't be flying deviating from the rules Therefore, you shouldn't be uploading videos of you deviating from the rules. Number 2, there's a big difference between criminal investigations and the FAA administrative investigation. The FAA is not a law enforcement body. The FAA is a department bureau or a department administration under the Department of Transportation. And the powers that the FAA has are regulatory powers. They can regulate something, so they can approve rules, so they have a rule-making power for the airspace. Now, they cannot create criminal offenses. That power only rests in Congress. Well, what has the FAA been doing all this time? Well, what they are called to do: create rules, rulemaking, and rulemaking enforcement, because they do have the power to enforce their own regulations. And the power that they have is a power to establish civil penalties or administrative penalties. Therefore, all investigations under the power of the FAA are administrative investigation, and they have to comply with the Administrative Procedure Act. And the purpose of the Administrative Procedure Act is to provide citizens a due process on everything that an agency or department does, whether it's rulemaking or adjudications. So when they are doing an investigation, they are either doing an informal adjudication or a formal adjudication, and they have to comply with the Administrative Procedure Act. That contrasts with criminal investigation, because the only department in the whole United States executive branch that can charge you and prosecute criminal charges is the Department of Justice. It's the only one. You will never see the FAA going to court charging someone with a criminal offense. That is why a few weeks back we saw the United States District Attorney for the Central District of California filing charges to a man that flew a drone and crashed with a helicopter. That is why that investigation was conducted by the FBI, which is the enforcement and investigative branch of the Department of Justice. And yes, if you read the press release, you saw that the FAA aided the FBI on that investigation. So in the end, the FBI was the one that requested a search warrant to that person and executed the search warrant. And they gathered all the information, and then the district attorney was the one that filed the charges. So in the end, you have to know that the FAA is not the one that's going to charge you with a criminal offense. That's going to be the Department of Justice through the United States District Attorney. And there is a general belief that the FBI doesn't have the time or doesn't want to get involved into those type of investigations. But the problem is that for the United States District Attorney to file a case, they need to have enough evidence to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest standard of proof in our judicial system. So it's easier for the FAA to investigate a administrative complaint rather than the Department of Justice investigating criminal complaints. And that brings us to our third topic, which is remote ID and how all this falls into place with remote ID. So the main problem that federal enforcement agencies have is that they don't have enough evidence to request search warrants, because in order to request and obtain a search warrant, you need to have probable cause. Yes, probable cause is a lower standard of proof than beyond reasonable doubt, but it's a considerably high standard. And in order to get a search warrant, you need to be really specific. You need to have the name of the person, the place that you're gonna search, and the objects that you're gonna search and seizure. And that is not easy when you have someone flying a drone that you don't know anything about him. Now, when remote ID comes into play, government agencies will be able to identify the person and his location and his home address, because you have to provide the FAA, or you have to provide the remote ID service with all that information. And yes, there's a problem about privacy, about people being able to see who's flying and where he's flying, and that will also make easier for federal agencies to identify the person who's flying the drone illegally. I'm not saying that when remote ID comes out, we're gonna see a lot of criminal charges and a lot of people getting into criminal trials because of flying drones illegally, but it's something that we have to consider. It's something that nobody is talking about, because they think that the only agency that matters here is the FAA, but in reality we have federal criminal offenses that the only one that can prosecute them is the Department of Justice, which is another branch different from the FAA. And in reality, the main problem here is that they don't have enough information to identify the person. But now with remote ID, it's gonna be a lot easier to identify people who are flying drones illegally. So the federal agencies will have all the information required to obtain a search warrant with probable cause. You might be able to have someone that spotted the drone in a temporary flight restriction area, and then the federal agency just pulls out the information from remote ID and voila, they can identify the person and his home address, and they can even identify the drone. So that search warrant is going to be really specific for that particular case, and that search warrant will hold up in court if it ever goes to trial. And finally, let's talk about a little bit about YouTube and the monetization program. So recently YouTube updated their terms and conditions, and basically they said that now they can monetize any video on your channel or any video that you upload, whether you are participating on or not in the YouTube Partner Program. And that is a really big leap here, because all these people that have a channel that is for recreational purpose, all these drone pilots that say, I'm just uploading footage for my channel because I like to share with the world my footage, will now be monetized, or have the possibility to be monetized even if the person decides not to monetize. And that will obviously constitute commercial use of drone footage. And who's responsible for that commercial use of drone footage? Well, remember, the drone pilot is the one that records, and he decides whether his operation is going to be recreational or is going to be Part 107 or commercial. So if you are a Part 107 certified pilot, then you won't have any issues with that, because yes, you are in compliance with regulations. But what if you are just a recreational pilot that is uploading videos to YouTube? Now YouTube can monetize those videos. Let's say that you uploaded a video 5 months ago, and that video went viral, and YouTube decides to put ads on that video. The FAA is gonna come after you, because the FAA are gonna see ads in your video and you don't have a Part 107 certification. So that's gonna be a problem for recreational pilots, and how they are going to respond to the FAA on those complaints. And in this case, we have mixed bags and mixed opinions about whether that is a commercial use of a drone or not. Because remember, the pilot decides the nature of the operation. And the question is, do all these recreational pilots now have to remove all the footage because now there's a potential of YouTube monetizing those videos. So that's all for my video. If you like the video, please hit that like button. Consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't do so. If you want to see more drone love videos, you can click here. If you want to see amazing footage, you can click here. And thank you, and see you next time.
Oh,